Imagine being 20 years old, about to give birth to the future King of England, and discovering that your husband never wanted your son to inherit the throne. Now picture the Queen of England herself stepping in to protect you and your baby from the very system you married into. This isn't fiction. This is the hidden reality behind one of the most photographed moments in royal history. So what made one woman so dangerous that the palace had to create an entirely new set of rules? It wasn't her actions, it was her connections, specifically the relationships she was carefully building within the British press and the corridors of power. We're talking about a calculated campaign to reshape public perception, and it was happening right under everyone's noses. Let's go back to February 6, 2026. Just 5 days before Diana was about to bring Prince William into the world, something happened that would change everything. Charles received a handwritten letter from Camilla, sealed in Navy stationery. What was written inside that note would remain hidden for decades. But now we know. And what it revealed absolutely shattered Diana's sense of security during what should have been the most protected time of her life. The timing was deliberate, the message was calculated, and the psychological impact on Diana created a spiral that medical staff later said genuinely endangered both her life and William's during delivery. Fast forward to today. In an absolutely unprecedented move, the Crown has authorized the release of internal royal documents that detail what really happened around William's birth in 1982. They're calling it a tribute to Queen Elizabeth's 100th birthday. But make no mistake, this is also about cementing William's position as the undisputed future king, because apparently that's been more contested than anyone realized. Here's what the Keeper of Royal Records said, and I'm paraphrasing here: this isn't just dusty old history. This is proof that the monarchy survives not just through bloodlines, but through courage, and sometimes through quiet rebellion from within its own walls. Think about what we all saw back in '82. Smiling photos outside the hospital, an elegant queen holding her grandchild, Diana waving to cheering crowds. Picture perfect, right? But beneath that polished surface was absolute chaos, a marriage falling apart, a birth that nearly turned fatal, and most shocking of all, evidence that Charles didn't see baby William as his successor. He saw him as a threat. The newly released documents include something called the Windsor Memorandum. And buried in those pages is a letter from Charles to Camilla, where he basically said, sure, William might wear the crown someday, but it won't be because I handed it to him. Let that sink in for a moment. A father writing about his newborn son like he's a political rival. Royal historians are calling this absolutely explosive. One expert put it this way: Charles wasn't just overwhelmed by new fatherhood, he was genuinely resentful. He watched Diana's popularity skyrocket, saw how the public adored William, and felt like the monarchy was evolving away from him, like the institution was moving toward this maternal line of emotional connection that people trusted more than the traditional duty-bound approach he represented. And it gets deeper. Charles apparently confided that he felt the monarchy was shifting toward what he called emotional fidelity, this idea that people cared more about genuine feeling than rigid protocol. And he saw that as a direct threat to his relevance. Now, here's where the Queen steps in. Moved by what she witnessed during William's traumatic birth, Elizabeth did something extraordinary. She established what's now confirmed as the Windsor Heir Protection Trust. This gave Diana limited but real authority over William's welfare. And here's the kicker: she didn't need Charles's approval to exercise it. But wait, there's more. The documents reveal that palace lawyers actually drafted a contingency plan that would have bypassed Charles entirely and named William as heir under what they called extraordinary emotional and constitutional conditions. This wasn't just theoretical. Legal experts put actual language together. The Queen genuinely considered skipping over her own son in the line of succession. Why would she even think about something so radical? Because palace physicians sent the Queen not one but two separate reports warning that Charles's emotional instability, his extramarital entanglements, and his complete disinterest in being a father posed a genuine risk to the Crown's reputation. The institution itself was in danger because of his behavior. The measure was never activated, thank goodness, but the fact that it existed at all tells you everything about how serious things had gotten. The monarch was prepared to take absolutely radical steps to protect Diana and William from Charles's potential collapse. Now let's talk about the shadow W figure in all of this. The documents refer to her simply as C in the logs. Camilla Parker Bowles. Her name starts appearing more and more frequently in palace records right around Diana's third trimester. Unauthorized visits to Highgrove. Late-night phone calls to Charles. Staff members whispering that Diana wasn't suitable for royal life. Palace aides started raising red flags about Camilla's influence. One memo described it as insidious, persistent, and calculated. There's this particularly harsh line from an assistant that reads, "Camilla doesn't offer Charles real counsel, just flattery. She's not positioning herself as a friend to the family. She's becoming a mirror for his self-pity." Publicly, the palace downplayed everything, but behind closed doors, the Queen was quietly limiting Camilla's access to royal events. There are instructions from Elizabeth herself saying the heir's image must not be compromised by her presence. That's about as direct as royal language gets. Against this backdrop of manipulation and institutional crisis, imagine being Diana, 20 years old, dealing with postpartum depression, under constant national scrutiny, and your husband is emotionally checked out. There's a transcript from a session with a palace psychologist where Diana says something heartbreaking. "I'm not just tired, I'm terrified. Charles doesn't want to be a father. He doesn't see William as his child. He sees him as the people's child. And I'm just the incubator." Reading that now, knowing what we know about how things unfolded, it's almost unbearable. The Queen's response was swift. She established the Heir Protection Trust in under 48 hours. And in the margin, the founding document, Elizabeth herself scribbled, "If I must protect the future of the crown from its present, so be it." That's not just bureaucratic language. That's a grandmother and a monarch drawing a line in the sand. The release of these documents isn't just historical revelation. It's institutional acknowledgement that William's birth story was redemptive. The royal family issued a rare joint statement, signed by Charles, Camilla, Edward, Anne, and Catherine. It says 44 years ago a child was born not only into lineage but into legacy. Today we honor that legacy and the grace and devotion William has shown in carrying that weight. Now, that might sound like standard royal platitudes, but read between the lines. They're acknowledging that something extraordinary happened. Something that required women in the institution to fight for William's future, when the men around him were too caught up in their own drama. Let's talk about what happened after William was born, because this is where Diana quietly revolutionized the monarchy without anyone really noticing at the time. Traditionally, when a royal heir is born, that baby becomes a symbol. The institution maintains them, observes them, raises them according to centuries of protocol. But Diana refused to accept that framework. She insisted on doing William's night feedings herself. She demanded that royal aides step back during bath time. And in one moment that became legendary among palace staff, she told a senior nanny, "I didn't give birth to a symbol. I gave birth to my son." Now, the Queen could have shut that down, could have enforced tradition. But instead, Elizabeth did something remarkable. Because she remembered her own isolated young motherhood, she issued a confidential directive. It became known internally as the Diana Protocols. Here's what that included. Privatized nursery access, meaning non-family staff couldn't interact with William during key hours. Flexible scheduling, allowing Diana to delay or reschedule official duties without consequence during early motherhood. And here's the big one: emotional protection measures. The Palace Medical Office was authorized to intervene if Diana showed signs of psychological distress, and they didn't need Charles's approval to do it. Think about what that really means. For the first time, a young mother, not the heir, a parent, held functional authority over how the future king would be raised. That's a seismic shift in power dynamics. Charles was furious. According to therapy session notes, he complained that Diana was treating the nursery like a fortress. He claimed that a prince's upbringing is the business of the state, not one woman's whims. But the Queen had already made her choice. There's a memo from 1983 where Elizabeth wrote to her private secretary, "My son is the heir by title, but she is heir by temperament. The monarchy must adapt to her strength or perish beneath its own dust." That's not just supportive, that's revolutionary thinking from someone who wore the crown for decades. This loyalty deepened in '84 when Diana was diagnosed with severe postnatal depression after Harry's birth. The royal household suggested sending Diana abroad for rest. The Queen overruled them. Instead, she personally summoned 3 vetted mental health professionals. Diana later told Sarah Ferguson that these actions saved my life. Twice. To the public, nothing seemed different. Diana still smiled at charity events, still waved from balconies. But behind that calm exterior was a genuine battle for autonomy. Charles was growing increasingly bitter, feeling strategically outmaneuvered by someone palace aides literally referred to as "that girl." It's now confirmed that Camilla advised Charles in a private letter, and I love this phrasing, "You're not losing your throne. You're losing control of the narrative. Take it back." That's political operative language right there. But the Queen didn't budge. Through the Diana protocols, Elizabeth ensured that Diana had access to her own press advisor by 1985. This advisor would eventually coordinate Diana's most powerful symbolic appearances, bringing William to shake hands with AIDS patients, sitting on the floor with schoolchildren, humanizing the crown in ways that Charles found vulgar but the public found utterly compelling. Those protocols laid the groundwork for how the monarchy evolved. And today, if you look at William's parenting choices, they mirror his mother's instincts. School runs without heavy security, insisting his children attend schools with kids from different economic backgrounds. The Royal Office of Education confirmed that William has officially requested the Diana protocols be digitized and preserved. He calls them the earliest blueprint of a monarchy that bends not by force, but by love. In that fragile moment after William's birth, Diana didn't just become a mother. She became the architect of a different future for the British monarchy, one where compassion quietly overtook tradition. Now let's address the elephant in every royal room, Camilla Parker Bowles. She never wore a crown, at least not then, never carried a title. And yet she haunted Kensington Palace like a presence no one could banish. While the public saw her as a harmless friend to Charles in the early '80s, internal documents reveal something far more calculated. Camilla wasn't just a friend, she was a political operator, a corrosive influence, and the primary source of psychological instability within the Wales marriage during its most vulnerable stage. Her role was informal, but it was strategic, and her presence cast a toxic shadow over William's earliest years. The newly declassified Kensington logs document over 24 visits by Camilla to Charles between April and September of 1982. Several of these occurred while Diana was literally confined to her hospital bed during late-stage pregnancy. Camilla's access wasn't just personal tolerance, it was institutionalized. She was quietly added to approved guest lists for private events, bypassing standard security review. One royal staff member wrote something chilling. "Lady C has become part of the household's rhythm. She moves like steam through the pipes. Unseen but ever present." What the public believed was a post-marriage friendship was actually a coordinated return. Camilla's reappearance was planned. Her proximity to Charles was carefully choreographed. And while Diana nursed a newborn and recovered from trauma, Camilla was already sowing seeds of division. What Camilla never did publicly, she mastered privately, turning the staff. Multiple notes in palace personnel files reveal that Camilla regularly dined with senior household staff and casually questioned Diana's readiness for motherhood. There's a memo from August 9, '82, where a nanny reported Camilla saying, "Some girls play house with real babies, but royal children require steel, not softness." Even more disturbing, Camilla was caught reviewing press clippings about Diana's postpartum depression and highlighting them with notes like "unstable and loses control easily." These marked clippings were later found in Charles's private study. Royal archivists believe Camilla used them to subtly reinforce Charles's alienation from Diana, feeding his belief that his wife was damaging the crown's image. A psychological evaluator wrote in an '84 report, Prince Charles appears to defer increasingly to Camilla for emotional regulation and decision support, including issues involving their child. This creates a dynamic that is inherently unstable and emotionally dangerous for Princess Diana. The Queen finally confronted Charles in September '82. Her words recorded in an aide summary were blunt. "You cannot serve two thrones, one with your wife and one with your distraction." Charles responded with indignation, claiming Camilla understood royal demands in a way Diana never would. The Queen ended the meeting by demanding Charles reduce contact until the crown's household is no longer divided. But Charles didn't obey. Within weeks, Camilla was riding at Balmoral, attending quiet dinners, exchanging private notes with Charles signed "Always yours, always near." By '84, rumors reached the press. While official statements denied impropriety, public fury followed. Letters to newspapers accused Camilla of inserting herself into a mother's moment, destroying the monarchy from the back corridors, becoming a modern version of Wallace Simpson. Junior royal staff reported psychological stress from what they called the toxic triangle inside Kensington Palace. One footman wrote, "One can sense it. The princess weeps alone. The prince smiles only when Camilla's name is mentioned. The entire palace feels divided, as though love and duty are warring in every hallway." This tension shaped William's early environment. Diana's protectiveness grew fierce. She refused to allow Camilla near the nursery and controlled William's education, travel, and caretakers. Diana told her therapist, "I'm not raising a king in Camilla's shadow." And yet, Camilla loomed every Sunday visit Charles made without William. Every gift sent only to Charles, every silent dinner where Diana sat alone as Charles read Camilla's latest letter. These moments shaped Diana's despair and William's environment. It was in this climate that William developed his famous instinct for loyalty and emotional discipline, a personality forged not in comfort, but in conflict. Camilla was not crowned then, not publicly. But these documents prove what many suspected: she was the third monarch in the house. Not by blood, not by right, but by presence, manipulation, and a quiet understanding of how to turn affection into influence. Now here's where things get absolutely wild. In early 1984, Britain was preoccupied with Cold War tensions and economic struggles. But within Buckingham Palace, a different crisis was brewing. One that would lead to the most controversial royal document in modern history. It was called the Bypass Plan. Its purpose? To create a secret mechanism that would allow the crown to leapfrog Prince Charles and pass the throne directly to his infant son, William. For decades, this was dismissed as tabloid nonsense. But the newly declassified materials confirm its existence, its language, and the moment that forced the crown to seriously consider a constitutional earthquake. On March 12, 1984, an emergency meeting was called at Balmoral Castle. It wasn't scheduled. It wasn't ceremonial, and the press was never informed. Attending were Queen Elizabeth, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher via secure line, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and several key advisors. The topic? The psychological collapse of Princess Diana and the increasingly erratic, aloof, and politically concerning behavior of Prince Charles. The royal mental health advisor warned, "We are witnessing a father emotionally withdrawing from his infant son, showing open disdain for the symbolic weight of his heir, and leaning too heavily on an extramarital emotional crutch. This is not sustainable." The Queen remained silent for most of the briefing, but at the end, she issued a statement that would become the foundation of the bypass plan. "If the vessel cracks before the tide recedes, we do not hand the child to the sea, we hand him the helm." Within 10 days, the palace produced a 12-page constitutional framework allowing for direct succession transfer from monarch to grandchild, bypassing the heir under extraordinary circumstances. 3 conditions were outlined: persistent failure to fulfill paternal obligations, conduct irreconcilable with the crown's moral standing, and unanimous agreement among G. the Queen, Prime Minister, and Privy Council. A margin note beside the third clause, in the Queen's handwriting, read, "Pray it remains ink, not action." What gave the bypass plan weight wasn't just speculation, it was another letter from Charles to Camilla, dated April 2, 84. One paragraph shocked even the Queen's most loyal advisers. "Let them have him. Let them make him king by 6 if it keeps them away from me. I was never made for this parade. I only ever wanted to ride and be left alone." This wasn't poetic melancholy. This was abdication in spirit. Elizabeth was reportedly furious. She wrote in her diary, "A king cannot choose his battles like a poet chooses words. If he yields his duty to comfort, he yields the throne." Technically, yes, this was possible. Under royal prerogative and with Parliament's approval, the monarch could propose succession alterations in extraordinary times. A legal historian explains, "It's a labyrinth, but the crown has leeway in shaping succession during crisis." The bypass plan wasn't fantasy. It was constitutional brinkmanship. Prime Minister Thatcher's response was diplomatic. While not endorsing the plan, she acknowledged the Crown's right to explore all protective measures. That was civil service code for, if it must be done, do it quietly. Now here's the truly stunning part. The bypass plan was never destroyed. Section 9 was absorbed into the Queen's Regency Guidelines in 1990, updated after Diana's death in 97, and reviewed by Charles himself in 2020. One internal memo states, "His Majesty signed the 2020 addendum with no objection to the clause about abdication, incapacity, or more al breach allowing the Crown to pass according to protective custodial guidance." Charles, now king, acknowledged the ghost of that bypass plan and left it untouched. According to royal aides, William was never told about the plan during childhood. However, the Queen's private journals hint that she trained him differently. She took him on solo walkabouts, arranged private tutorials with Oxford scholars, gave him state papers to review at 15, hosted solo audiences with him at Balmoral by 16. One passage from August 98 reads, "He asks better questions than his father ever did. I prepare him not for power, but for purpose." The two are not always the same. The bypass plan was never triggered. Charles did ascend. But its mere existence represents the deep anxiety that haunted the Crown in the 80s. It wasn't just about scandal, it was about survival. And at the center of that tension stood William. Not as a boy, but as a silent symbol of the monarchy's last insurance policy. By dawn of 1985, the British monarchy stood at a silent crossroads. Publicly, the royal family still projected unity. Charles and Diana waving from state carriages, baby William appearing in choreographed portraits, Queen Elizabeth carrying out duties with grace. But inside palace gates, loyalties were shifting. The institution faced a binary choice: protect the line of tradition or protect the child who embodied the future. The documents confirm that 85 was the year Queen Elizabeth chose her side. She would align the crown with Diana and William, even at the cost of alienating her own son. On January 7, 85, during the annual retreat to Sandry, Diana suffered what was classified as a serious emotional crisis. She locked herself in the nursery for over 4 hours, refusing to eat or speak, clutching a letter from Charles that read only, "I will be at Highgrove through the weekend. Do not follow me." Diana had just weaned Prince William. Her postpartum depression from Harry's birth was deepening. Charles was increasingly absent, retreating to Camilla's estate, and William, then just 2 years old, was beginning to sense the emotional climate. One of the Queen's footmen reported that William asked him that evening, "Why is Mommy crying in my chair?" It was this moment that finally moved the Queen to act, not as sovereign but as grandmother. In February 85, under the Queen's direct order and funded through royal coffers, the palace established the Child Sovereign Safeguard Unit. Its mission? Protect the physical and emotional development of Prince William against domestic instability. The measures were quiet but powerful. A dedicated nursery team loyal only to the Queen and Diana. Restricted access to William by any unofficial visitor. including Camilla quarterly psychological evaluations by child trauma specialists. Most critically, this unit reported directly to the Queen, not Charles. The monarch had established a protective apparatus around her grandson that operated independently of his father's control. While Diana recovered under this shield, Charles deepened his bond with Camilla. He began writing to her daily, often with resentment toward Diana and even William. In a March '85 note, Charles allegedly wrote, "He's not my son. He's theirs now. The staff watches me like I'm the outsider. See." Charles's paranoia was exacerbated by the Queen's growing proximity to Diana and William. In one tense confrontation at Windsor, Charles accused the Queen of building a monarchy without me. Her reply, as recorded, "Then build yourself into it, Charles. But I will not leave the child unguarded while you untangle your affections." By late '85, the public began sensing something was wrong. Charles and Diana took separate cars to events. Their body language stiffened. In one photo from a charity function, Diana can be seen gently guiding William while Charles walks 5 feet ahead, alone. Inside the Royal Communications Office, a shift had occurred. A memo from November '85 directed all future narrative around William's upbringing to emphasize maternal strength, emotional sensitivity, and future readiness. One line stands out: "We are no longer managing a prince. We are cultivating a sovereign." By year's end, the Crown's internal architecture had tilted. Diana was viewed as co-architect of the monarchy's emotional modernization. William was treated not as a child to be molded, but as a symbol to be protected. And Charles, increasingly isolated, spent Christmas '85 at Highgrove, separated from his family. The Queen's official holiday portrait included only herself, the Queen Mother, Diana, William, and Harry. Charles's exclusion wasn't accidental. It was a message, never spoken aloud but now confirmed in the record. The Crown will survive with or without you. On August 31st, 1997, the Crown lost its brightest light. Diana's death shocked the world. But inside Buckingham Palace, it struck something even more sacred: the quiet oath by Queen Elizabeth on June 21st, '82. When she sat beside a sobbing, terrified young mother and whispered, "I will protect this child even from us." For 15 years, Elizabeth had honored that vow, shielding William through protocols, trust funds, emotional buffers, and maternal empowerment. Now, with Diana gone, the Queen faced an unprecedented decision: how to preserve Diana's love without Diana herself. In the hours after Diana's death in Paris, the Queen famously remained at Balmoral with William and Harry away from London, refusing immediate public appearances. The press crucified her for emotional detachment. But documents now show her reasoning was entirely aligned with the protection mandate. In a private call to Prime Minister Tony Blair, Elizabeth said, "They are not princes tonight. They are boys who lost their mother. I will not parade their grief." This act, seen then as cold, was actually the final activation of the Diana protocols. The Queen shielded her grandsons from the world, just as she'd promised Diana she would. In 2022, Prince William discovered 2 documents locked in his grandmother's private safe: a personal journal kept by Elizabeth chronicling each year of William's life, titled "My Promise to Her," and a sealed letter from Diana to the Queen dated July '97, never sent but recovered from Diana's desk. In that letter, Diana wrote, "I know I've broken many royal rules, but you never broke your promise. William is strong because you were strong when I could not be. Thank you for seeing me not just as a wife or failure, but as a mother worth believing in." William wept upon reading it. In his own handwriting, he added a note to the final page of Elizabeth's journal: "You both carried me through the storm. I will carry your legacy into the sun."
As of February 6, 2026, Prince William stands on the cusp of becoming the most prepared monarch in British history. The institutional structures once built to protect him have evolved into the moral spine of his leadership. The trust continues operating under Diana's original mandate, providing independence and security to her grandchildren. William's parenting reflects the core of the Diana protocols: love before protocol, duty grounded in compassion. As part of today's anniversary commemoration,
the palace released a rare statement. The future king was not merely raised in halls of gold, but in a fortress of promises, made by women who understood that love is a form of power. May that power endure, and may that promise be kept for all who come after. So here's what we've learned today. The story we thought we knew about Prince William's birth was only half the truth. Behind the smiling photographs and royal pageantry was a constitutional crisis, a battle for a child's soul, and two remarkable women who chose love over tradition. Diana fought to be a mother in a system that wanted her to be a symbol. Elizabeth fought to protect her grandson from the very institution she led. And William? He became the bridge between the monarchy's past and its future, shaped not by duty alone, but by the fierce love of women who refused to let protocol destroy what mattered most. If you found this story as compelling as I did, show some love by hitting that like button. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into the real stories behind royal headlines. And drop a comment telling me what shocked you most about these revelations. Because this isn't just history. This is proof that sometimes the most powerful acts of rebellion happen quietly, in nurseries and private offices, when someone decides that protecting a child matters more than protecting an image. That's the real legacy. That's the story that needed to be told. And now, finally, 44 years later, the world knows the truth.